Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three martinis coming up.
Jim Garrity is back today, and if that weren't enough to get you excited about the Thursday edition of the Three Martini Lunch, it's all good martinis today. So, Jim, let's start with what has become a recurring story in the Middle East, but man, I never get tired of this, and I know you certainly don't. It looks as though another key terrorist figure has been eliminated. No, this is not a rerun. It's not Ismail Haniyeh blown up in Iran. It's not Hassan Nasrallah or the guy that replaced him for like an hour and a half. No, this is Yahya Sinwar, the head of the military wing of Hamas, the mastermind of the October 7th attacks last year. And it at least looks very likely that he was killed by Israeli forces in Gaza. There are some reports that the DNA extracted from him is actually confirmed that it is him. And so, Jim, assuming that is the case, first of all, it's fascinating. This was not some, cloak and dagger operation. It appears that he just happened to be somewhere where the IDF was carrying out an operation and was a casualty. But in terms of, the efficiency and effectiveness in taking out the top terrorist leadership to their west, to the north, to the northeast, I mean, it's been quite a year.
So Yahya Sinwar was alleged. It was by a tank unit that was just in the area. There was, fire, and they returned fire. Apparently, one of the guys in that tank unit had been in the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, for an entire 9 months. So as somebody said, this is like getting killed by the guys from Stripes. And so you think about it, you've been in uniform for 9 months, and you've killed the head of the military wing of Hamas. First of all, it's Miller time. Second of all, you can be in uniform for the rest. You're never going to have a better day. I hate to tell you, but you peaked early. This is about as good as it's going to possibly get in your career. Look, we're a little bit past the 1-year anniversary of the October 7th attacks. This was a war that was begun entirely at the will of Hamas and ultimately at the will of Yahya Sinwar. And he launched this unprovoked attack, targeted women and children, slaughtered people, raped women, and started a wave of recurring back and forth violence that had a terrible effect on Israel, but indisputably had a terrible, terrible effect on the Palestinian people that Hamas allegedly is defending and fighting in behalf of. Terrible effect, devastated the Gaza Strip, caused a regional, killings in other countries like Iran. And he really seemed to think he was going to win this fight against Israel. And my first thought when I saw the news was, God, to make that kind of decision, what was going through his head? And the answer is shrapnel.
You beat me to it.
I had to get that in there because, it comes up every now and then when I'm, writing about or thinking about the Ukraine war. That happened because Vladimir Putin wanted to do it. That's it. There was no threat to Russia. There was no provocation on the part of Ukraine. This war began because the top guys at Hamas wanted it to happen. And so many people have been killed. So many people's lives have been ruined. The world has evil men. It's not likely you were going to get a lot of Gandhi types leading Hamas, particularly the militant wing. Even if you got somebody who's not that bad, they don't end up in the military wing. But sometimes really terrible things happen because of the actions of particular evil men. You could say this is kind of the inverse of the great man theory of history. The idea that it is not these large, impersonal tidal waves of cultural forces that make things happen or demographics or something. Sometimes it is the decisions of particular human beings. And this was one. And he was an absolutely rotten guy. And, he needed to start this war like he needed another hole in the head, which he has, if you've seen the photo that's going around. I know, he was a really evil guy, and he's not here anymore. And so the world's a better place because of that. And you'd like to think everybody's looking at that and saying, wow, Hamas started this war with Israel, and I think they're almost out of guys to be the leadership. This is now going to turn into one of those drummer of Spinal Tap situations where they're just going to work through the next few. No word on whether any hostages had been recovered. There was a report that he was traveling with hostages as human shields. Just a remarkable day. Hopefully a step towards the world becoming a better place. Hamas is now not just significantly damaged, not only have their ranks been thinned, their leadership has been decimated.
You remember we had the deck of cards in Iraq?
Yes.
If you could only play with the cards of the people you're still looking for, I think like a 7 or an 8 would take the trick in pretty much every game that you're playing now, because it's been a very efficient year.
They're going to need another 52 cards at this rate. You can't play poker with that set anymore.
Good news, and hopefully not only good news for Israel, but also the larger Middle East, as these horrible people who have been exploiting civilians for a very long time are no longer on the scene. I'd like to think that means they're going to change their ways. I have my serious doubts about that, but we can always hope now that some of these very nefarious
players, if nothing else, this should deter future random acts of terrorism against the Israelis, because the consequences become clearer and clearer with each passing month.
No question about it. Well, a lot of information. The Israelis are good at gathering information to target their latest terrorist mastermind, but artificial intelligence might be the most important new computer technology ever. It's storming every industry, and literally billions of dollars are being invested in it. So buckle up. But the problem is that AI needs a lot of speed and processing power. So how do you compete without costs spiraling out of control? Well, it's time to upgrade to the next generation of the cloud. It's called Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, or OCI.
OCI is a single platform for your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs. OCI has 4 to 8 times the bandwidth of other clouds, one consistent price instead of variable regional pricing. And of course, nobody does data better than Oracle. So now you can train your AI models at twice the speed and less than half the cost of other clouds.
So if you want to do more and spend less, like Uber 8x8 and Databricks Mosaic, take a free test drive of OCI at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, on to our second good martini now. This has actually been playing out for a couple of days in the state of Georgia, which is one of the big battleground states in this year's presidential election. You might have noticed a bunch of posts and excited lefties pointing out that Jimmy Carter got to vote for Kamala Harris on the first or second day of early voting this week. But the bigger story out of there is that the turnout has been immense. This is from the first day, 2 days ago. The Georgia Secretary of State, Brad Raffensperger, not exactly Donald Trump's favorite person, but he was easily reelected in 2022. He says 305,000 people, with some counties still uploading some final numbers. What a great day for Georgia voters. And he says, that absolutely obliterated previous records. He goes on to say, Georgia's voting system has proven secure, efficient, and accurate. That's why we're at the top for election integrity and voter convenience, despite years of lies from Stacey Abrams, failed lawyers, and experts. We are battle-tested and ready to serve. And so I think they're expecting 500,000 people by the end of yesterday. I don't know if they got to that number or not, but that's a massive head start on the number of eligible voters in the state of Georgia. And one thing I learned yesterday, Jim, is that in the reforms that they did, when it comes to mail-in ballots, they make you put down your driver's license ID, because instead of having some volunteer or even paid election official try to make sure your signatures match, which is a less secure system, if people happen to steal your ballot out of your mailbox or whatever, them knowing your driver's license ID is pretty unlikely. So while I'm not a huge fan of that, they're making it about as secure as you can make it. And of course, this all comes, 3 years after the left absolutely lost their minds, talking about how this was Jim Crow, or Joe Biden saying it was Jim Eagle, and you had Coke and Delta and Major League Baseball all throwing hissy fits that this was taking us back to the days of segregation. Instead, we're seeing voter turnout like we've never seen before.
Greg, I'm thinking back to that, it's just like Jim Eagle comment from Joe Biden. And, all of the Major League Baseball taking away the All-Star game from Atlanta because, we can't be a party to a state that's got this kind of terrible, oppressive voter laws there. We talked about, how the turnout was up in the 2022 midterms, both the primaries and the general election. They did a survey, and the number of African Americans who said they had a difficult time voting in 2022 was 0%. Not even one. But so you put this in the context of, say, being told for several months or even years that President Biden is fine. And then he goes out on the debate stage and no, he's not. Or the lab leak is a crazy conspiracy theory with no supporting evidence whatsoever. The Chinese are just too careful to do such a thing. Apparently, what was the publication that just announced shoplifting is a real problem? And that this wasn't, although they did use the Simpsons meme. We've tried nothing. What else are we supposed to do? I believe I was out yesterday and you guys were talking about the FBI crime stats where they did this revision. Actually, yeah, no, there isn't that dramatic, oh, David Moore didn't actually know what he was talking about in that debate. Oh, gosh, golly. Russiagate. It turns out Donald Trump is not a Russian agent since the 1980s or whatever it was that Jonathan Chait had put on the cover of New York Magazine. How many times does the mainstream media version of event, the narrative, need to be proven wrong? How many times does the Democratic Party's narrative, a lot of people are going to say I repeated myself there, have to be proven wrong? How many times does the conservative media or the Republican argument need to be right before people will say, there's this recurring pattern here? Why? In the end, it was always kind of they're banning giving people glasses of water. Don't you understand? Waiting online in Georgia, it's like the Sahara Desert. People are passing away from dehydration because of that. Guess what? Elected officials lie a lot. Politicians lie a lot. And guess what? Democrats lie a lot too. Oh, by the way, the octogenarian president is not always careful about what his facts are. And when he doesn't know something, his instinct is to get angry and to really rile up. It's not just Jim Crow, which was segregation. It's worse than Jim Crow. It's not even Jim Crow 2.0. It's Jim Eagle, because eagles are bigger and they have bigger talons than crows. That's what makes it, And it's just like, this is just absolute abject nonsense. Why do people play along with this? Why is there no one say, Mr. President, that's actually not what the Georgia law does? Foreshadowing our third martini. There's a reason, if you want to be good at politics, if you want to be good at communication, if you want to be a good and effective elected official, you should be doing a lot of interviews and press conferences. You should be taking a lot of questions. And you should get used to hostile questioning. One, so you don't lose your cool. But two, because you get used to being challenged and you don't fall apart when you get challenged. And Biden almost never saw the press anymore. So he could say in a prepared remarks, reading off a teleprompter, he could call it Jim Eagle. Actually, I think the Jim Eagle, I think he was speaking off the cuff. But there's no one around to say, yeah, really, Mr. President, you really think that's a fair? Did you actually read the law? Do you know what it actually does? He never gets that. And as a result, he just kind of rambles, and that's where we are. So good for you, Georgia. Everyone's, if you feel like early voting, go ahead and do that. If you want to wait until Election Day, go right. That's perfectly fine too. I just note that you never know when you're going to have car trouble. You never know when the kid's going to get sick. You never know. Something's going to happen. So sometimes if you have the option, it makes sense to do that. It's your God-given, constitutionally protected right to vote. Go out and do it if you want to do it early. And good for you, Georgia.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think the reason the numbers are up is because Republicans are embracing the idea of early voting more because of the exact reasons you mentioned. The plan to swamp the ballot box on Election Day seemed like a good idea to some at the time, but I don't know that it has panned out in the last couple of cycles. And so Glenn Youngkin definitely made that big push during Virginia's midterms last year, and other Republicans are pushing that as well. So, Jim, the reason the media lit their hair on fire over this debate back in 2021 was because the Democrats were throwing a fit. The Democrats had to know that this was not going to be, as Biden suggested, going back to George Wallace, Bull Connor, and even Jefferson Davis. So why did the Democrats light their hair on fire? Is it just about voter ID? Do they hate the idea of voter ID so much that they created this whole hysteria where corporate America decided it had to abandon Atlanta?
Well, one is their axiomatic belief that Republicans are racist. Racists are Republicans. The two terms are used interchangeably. Therefore, if Republicans want to do something, it must be because of racist motives. But also to drive up Democratic turnout. Tell people, so-and-so doesn't want you to vote. It's a good way. You're going to tell me I can't vote? I'm going to go out and exercise my right to do that. So it was a voter turnout, message. And other than in the Senate race with Herschel Walker, where he brought his own fumbles, it didn't work. Republicans won up and down the ballot all over the state. But it was just kind of, it's now, I think, just reflexive in their minds that any electoral reform proposed by a Republican, ipso facto, is an effort of, whether or not it is voter suppression, it must be denounced as voter suppression because it can't possibly, be an actual, good, if they're trying to take dead people off the rolls, well, clearly, they're just trying to suppress the vote amongst the deceased American community. I'm sorry, apparition Americans is the term they prefer.
That's right. We gotta have the updated lingo on that, of course. So, quite a day for Georgia, and it looks like the turnout's continuing to be robust there. But the best way to start your day is with Lumen. That's how you know what your body is doing metabolism-wise and how to chart the rest of your day. How do you use Lumen? Very simple. You wake up, step one, grab your Lumen, take a deep breath in, and exhale into your lumen. It'll tell you if you're burning fats, you're burning carbs, and what your diet should look like for the rest of the day. And it can get much more detailed the more you want to use it, involving your workouts, your sleep, and even your stress management.
Your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food that you eat into the fuel that keeps you going. And because your metabolism is at the heart of everything your body does, ideal metabolic health can translate to a whole host of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness results, and even better sleep. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health.
So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/3ml to get 15% off your Lumen. That is lumen.me/3ml for 15% off your purchase. Again, that's lumen.me/3ml. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. All right, Jim, on to our final good martini for the day, and that is the Fox News interview of Kamala Harris by Bret Baier last night, which was testy. That is the official word that is coming out from multiple mainstream news organizations. It was testy. Well, first of all, it was a compressed time to do the interview because she was late and she filibustered a lot of her answers. You know, it was tough because the main left-wing reaction pretty much channeled, do you remember Stephanie on Full House? And her catchphrase was, "How rude." That's pretty much how all the lefties thought of Bret Baier after last night, because he tried to actually get her to answer the questions when she did try to filibuster. But we're going to look at three different clips here, and I know you have many different takes beyond these. But first of all, we have got this one from Bret Baier trying to clarify positions that Kamala clearly held 5 years ago and whether she still holds them. These were related to immigration.
There's a lot of people that look back at what you said in 2019 when you first ran for president. And there have been changes, and you've talked about some of them. When it comes to immigration, you supported allowing immigrants in the country illegally to apply for driver's license, to qualify for free tuition at universities, to be enrolled in free health care. Do you still support those things?
Listen, that was 5 years ago, and I'm very clear that I will follow the law. I have made that statement over and over again, and as Vice President of the United States, that's exactly what I've done, not to mention before.
If that's the case, you chose a running mate, Tim Walz, governor of Minnesota, who signed those very things into state law. So do you support that?
We are very clear, and I am very clear, as is Tim Walz, that we must support and enforce federal law, and that is exactly what we will do.
Total non-answer.
Wait, no, he's not. If the law of Minnesota says we will not cooperate with federal authorities, and he's the governor of Minnesota, and he hasn't said, "Oh, I made a terrible mistake. Let me undo that. Let me by executive order say, never mind, we never meant to do that." Then no, he is not cooperating with federal authorities, and they're not priority. Like, you are insisting 2 + 2 = 5. This is the good martini, folks.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And if you put that in Biden's voice in the beginning, that was 4 or 5 years ago, man.
Yeah, yes, that's the other, like, it isn't that long ago. And if the entire Democratic Party wants a do-over and says, look, Trump got into office and everybody's running for president, and we just flipped out, and we just all thought we had to go to the left of MSNBC. That's why we were saying abolish ICE. That's why we were saying abolish the police. We never meant any of that stuff. You know, like, fine, but come out and say so. And like, you probably should try to grapple with the fact that you went through what you're now claiming was temporary insanity for a good portion of that. People could be generally asking, if Jim is flipping out and ready to burst through the screen right now, why is this a good martini? Well, first of all, a couple molecules of credit to Kamala Harris for showing up for an interview on Fox News. She had never done that before. Not in her days as California State Attorney General, never as a U.S. Senator, never as a presidential candidate, and never as a vice president. Now, look, I think it's safe to say Fox News covers the news at minimum one step to the right of, say, CNN, significantly more to the step to the than MSNBC. You can argue about whether Fox News is center-right, whether it's conservative, whether it's Trump or MAGA. I actually don't think it is. And by the way, I think there is also a very distinct difference in philosophy from Fox News before prime time and Fox News when prime time begins at 8 o'clock. The talk show hosts, the Sean Hannitys, Laura Ingrams, they approach the news and their jobs differently than the ones who report the news, and Bret Baier is up there. And so, look, first of all, credit to her for, quote unquote, walking into the lion's den. But if they feel like this was an ambush interview, this is what she should have been to get, kind of questions she should have been getting from the beginning. There was nothing that he asked last night that was blindsiding her out of left field or anything like that. She should have been prepared for this. Clearly she wasn't, or at least she thought she could go in and give her standard filibuster answers. And Bret Baier wasn't having any of that. And I think he actually made everybody else who's interviewed her before, Stephanie Ruhle, Dana Bash, call her daddy, all the tough ones, that basically, like, they let her. Bret, I'm glad you asked me that, because immigration is an important issue. It's an issue. Like, her opening question was this is so important. Yeah, we get it. That's why we asked about it. Go skip over that. The question was a very specific question of how many had been released into this country in the 3.5 years of the administration. How many illegal immigrants? Now, Bret Baier knew the answer. I think he was testing to see if she knew the answer or had any idea. It was close. He even suggested, do you think it's 1 million? Do you think it's 3 million? The answer was an estimated 6 million. But I think he suspected she didn't know, and he suspected she was not going to answer, and she was going to try to filibuster. And that's exactly what she did, and she never got around to it. I began the morning jolt with a joke. A little bit of credit to her for showing up, even though I think she did very badly. Credit to Bret Baier, who ate his Wheaties and brought it today, or last night. I jokingly said, we've been yearning for leadership. We want somebody who knows the issues. We want somebody who's not afraid to get into policy detail. We want somebody who's clear, direct. That's what we want in a leader. And unfortunately, Bret Baier is not running for president. Because last night, I like that guy. That guy knows what he's talking about. And I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek, but he knows the details of what the Biden administration has actually done on the border and on the issue of illegal immigration better than Kamala Harris does. Either she knows it really well and she doesn't want to talk about it, and she won't go into those details. But here's the thing. I don't think she knew the answer to that question. And you know why she didn't know? I think she doesn't want to know. If you care a great deal about the Chicago Bears, you know a lot about the Chicago Bears. Whatever you care about, you tend to know a lot about it because it matters to you. Why does she get stumped by questions like this? Because this is not an issue. She was the migration czar, not the border czar, they emphasize, as if the migrants were just going off to Antarctica or something like that. The migrants were going to the border. That's why she's expected to know some things about this. She's gotten very comfortable offering very generic, this is important, and we're going to address this type issues. Look, half the country doesn't like Trump. This is it, not quite gift wrapped to her, but you got 3 times as much money, 3 times as much spending, offices, 3 times as many volunteers and staffers. She should be winning by a lot. She's not. And I think it's because of this. I think the whole country looks at her and says, we got fooled with Biden. He was a way further to the left than we thought we were getting. You won't answer the questions. You're hiding part of it. We know 5 years ago you were a hard lefty, and now you say that's not you anymore. But you won't go into it. And also, by the way, you picked a hard lefty because he's, folksy and wears red flannel. And that's not, that the entire country is like, you're a lot more to the left than you want to admit you are. And every time she gets into one of these circumstances, it becomes clear. And that's why she goes to the circular haiku Hallmark card type answers. So we'll see how it shakes out. But again, a little bit of credit to her for going, credit to Bret Baier. And I make point out, she's never doing another interview with Fox News as long as she lives. No. So this was it. This is the one opportunity Bret Baier got to ask questions. Really the only time anybody at Fox News, and really, she's not going to follow this up by doing Meet the Press. She's not going to follow this up by doing any other tough interview. So this is it. This is instead of a second debate, we got to see Bret Baier interview Kamala Harris. And for my money, that was just as good, probably even better.
Well, I think the last tough Meet the Press interview for a lefty was the day before Tim Russert died. Yeah. So anyway, a couple more moments here just to show her trying to stay off the topic that Bret Baier was asking about. First of all, Bret's referencing here a poll from Marquette University Law School showing 79% of Americans think America's on the wrong track.
More than 70% of people tell the country is on the wrong track. They say the country is on the wrong track. If it's on the wrong track, that track follows 3.5 years of you being vice president and President Biden being president. That is what they're saying, 79% of them. Why are they saying that? If you're turning the page, you've been in office for 3.5 years.
And Donald Trump has been running for office.
Now, turning the page from Donald Trump, who hasn't been in office for 4 years. And then the issue of Biden's health finally came up in a real substantive way.
Let me ask you this. You told many interviewers that Joe Biden was on his game, that ran around circles on his staff. When did you first notice that President Biden's mental faculties appeared diminished?
Joe Biden, I have watched from the Oval Office to the Situation Room, and he has the judgment and the experience to do exactly what he has done in making very important decisions on behalf of the American people.
There were no concerns raised?
Brett, Joe Biden is not on the ballot.
I understand.
And Donald Trump
but
is.
You talked about it.
And Donald Trump
After George Clooney said within a few minutes of talking to President Biden at a fundraiser that he thought this was not the same Joe Biden that we saw on the debate stage.
Donald Trump is on the ballot.
I understand. You met with him at least once a week for 3.5 years. You didn't have any concerns?
I think the American people have a concern about Donald Trump.
She had one message going in, she had one message going out. And so, I mean, the people saw Joe Biden. They've seen Joe Biden. They had the chance to come clean after the Her report. They didn't do it. It showed up on the debate stage. She came out to defend him that very night. And so people know what they think of Joe Biden. They know he's intellectually diminished, and the fact that she still can't admit it is quite something.
So she has answers like that and exchanges like that. 25 minutes with Bret Baier. She's really going to sit down with Joe Rogan for 3 hours?
Not a chance.
Right. You just picture Rogan saying, so he didn't seem old to you? He didn't see, you didn't see any shuffling? That whole thing where he freezes in front of a whole crowd and just doesn't speak for a few minutes? He never did that around you? Okay. Yeah.
And the thing that we didn't mention, but Bret Baier certainly did conspicuously, is that a bunch of Kamala staffers were doing their best Tim Walz impression and vigorously waving to wrap up the interview after like 25 minutes.
Again, glad she did it. We saw why she hadn't done it. And, just generally, if you want to run for president someday, do tough interviews. Do them because, Trump has bad interviews that go badly all the time. But because he does them all the time, it's not a big deal. That we're all kind of used to. Oh, my God, he said we're going to buy Greenland again? That kind of, there's kind of this built-in baseline for either bad answers or craziness or totally changing the subject or veering off on weird tangents. Because she doesn't do them, each one of these interviews is a bigger deal. And I think it's a demonstration that ultimately the basement campaign mentality that permeated the Biden campaign in 2020 is still alive and well in 2024, unlike Yahya Sinwar.
No doubt. I do think that Bret Baier should have played the original Trump clip about the military before playing the explainer clip. It would be fine to do both. He probably should have done both. But I don't think that diminishes the overall
She has
issue,
a fairer gripe that he has said things that about targeting enemies. And he specifically said our enemies, our domestic enemies and things like that. But, and also like when you say Trump and Trump said, I never threatened anybody. Well, yeah. Well, Trump denying something happened is not evidence it did not happen.
On that note, Jim, quite a day. And now we've got, 19 days before Election Day. So I think we'll make it. So a lot more to talk about tomorrow, I'm sure. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos, Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the podcast if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Dateline_DC. Have a great Thursday and join us again on Friday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.